Hi, Shaka Hislop, Honorary President of Show Racism, the Red Card, here for our newest edition of our 25 for 25 podcast, where we speak to so many people who continue to have outsized impacts in the world of equality and social justice. I'm delighted to be joined by Ravishaan Muthiah, who's worked for Greenpeace, the Labour Party, and for immigration rights, speaks to all the things that we hold dear to us here at Show Racism the Red Card. Added to that, he's the newest inductee, or one of the newest inductees to the Board of Trustees at Show Racism the Red Card. Rav, it's a delight to have you here with us today.
This is 25 for 25, a Show Racism the Red Card podcast. Make sure you subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube.
Rav, there's so much we can get to. You've dedicated your life pretty much to addressing so many of your own community issues, from Greenpeace to politics with the Labour Party. At a time where I think politics continues to divide and has this kind of hard edge to it, that there's so little overlap. I'd like to get to that, but talk to me a little bit first with how you started in your own social work.
Yeah, well, look, Shaka, I think, we're all really compassionate people in the world. I think we all want to stand up for other people. When we see people being bullied in the schoolyard or we see people being treated badly, we all want to sort of stand up for the underdog. So in terms of, for me, I think I've always had a passion and a care for people, a care for humanity. So, I've been really fortunate, as you say, to work in jobs for Greenpeace, fighting for the planet, working for the Labour Party, fighting for workers' rights and people's rights across the country. But, there's so many people across the world, in our own country, who are silenced by the government, they're silenced by corporations, by their bosses. And, I believe that we need to make sure that these people's voices are heard. My mum, just last year, thousands of farmers took to the streets in the capital of India, fighting back against oppressive farming laws. And then my father's family hail from Sri Lanka, and they were activists fighting against a really oppressive and disastrous civil war. So I think that sort of heritage also made me, really want to fight for people, stand up for people. And, I think it's only right to stand up for oppressed people across the world.
I find that so compelling. So it's more born out of example of your parents and their work for marginalized communities than, say, an experience of your own.
Well, I mean, I guess I had many experiences myself. So growing up in London, I had the experiences of police racism, I guess, the 70s. And there was a big rise in Islamophobia, a big rise in sort of a spotlight on people that looked like me. I was walking once from the school gates to a fish and chip shop with my friends. It's a normal thing that a child would do. And I remember the police stopped us. They started asking us about Tony Blair's new anti-terrorism laws and all these really weird questions. I was too young at the time to question it and, speak back and say, why are you asking me this? But I guess, that definitely had an impact. That definitely made me want to stand up for my community, other marginalized communities. But I'm also very fortunate that, in my background and my family heritage, I've seen a lot of people fighting for what they believe is right, fighting for their beliefs and principles. And that's definitely core to me.
Your first official foray into this social justice came through Greenpeace, and I phrase that specifically. I think we live our lives in a way, I think, that stands up for others, that stands up for social justice. But you get involved with Greenpeace, and an organization known for this. What was your work with them, and in what capacity?
Yeah, I mean, my work at Greenpeace was, fighting back against big oil corporations. So, we were fighting against, there was a new oil field in the North Sea called Cambo. So one of the main things we were doing was we were pushing back to try and stop the government from opening Cambo oil field. because we know that, more oil and gas fields are not going to, solve the climate crisis. They're not going to even meet the energy demands that we have. So, we're in a global energy crisis right now. We're in a domestic energy crisis in the UK as well. But new oil and gas fields don't help this. They don't solve the crisis, because that energy will be released in 10, 20 years. And the effect it has on the environment in terms of the pollution, the CO2 emissions, where it's going to lead us in terms of, the climate disaster it's going to take us towards, really massively outweigh the benefit that it'll bring. And there's so many good solutions. There's renewable energy, that we can have. There's insulating our homes properly. There's so many positive ways to deal with the climate crisis. So that was my main work there. And, it was a work to also link climate justice as well. How can we link colonialism to the climate crisis, empire building, Western powers that have, emitted masses of CO2 for hundreds of years. And now who are the people that are sort of, being hurt by it, being damaged? Whose houses are being torn apart? It's people in the global south. It's people, on the other side of the world who have already been hit by colonialism. So yeah, that was the work that we did there. It's really important work to me and to many of us, because it's going to hit people across the world.
What and how did you transition into politics with the Labour Party?
Yeah, so I mean, with the Labour Party, again, while I worked for the Labour Party, I think we had really progressive policy pledges and a really progressive manifesto. I think a lot of the pledges, if they came into law now, or if they were put into law, it would have been brilliant. I think we would have had a much different pandemic. We wouldn't have suffered the way we did. I think we wouldn't be in an economic crisis like we are now. So I'm really proud of that work that we did there. And yeah, I worked for a candidate, Faiza Shaheen, in Chingford and Woodford Green. She's standing again. She's a Labour candidate there. And we fought really hard against the Conservative leader. It's really hectic work, really busy work. And then I also worked on a deputy leadership campaign for Angela Rayner, who's now the deputy leader of the Labour Party. So yeah, that was the work I did there.
And well, with the Joint Council for the Welfare of Immigrants, and immigration in particular has been such a hot button topic between different sides of the political divide. How have you seen that divide grow? How have you seen those discussions and discourse be affected by the Brexit vote?
Oh, by the Brexit vote, really interesting. Well, I mean, I think the Brexit vote was really, the whole Brexit campaign was really run on immigration. They really, the Leave campaign were really pushing that we would, close our borders and those sorts of things, and it would drive down immigration. I think this was a dog whistle tactic and a racist tactic, really, to rile people up and to create an external enemy. And I think, really it was a disgraceful campaign. But in terms of how it sort of played out, we can see that the Conservative government that are in power, a lot of them were leavers and a lot of them wanted to leave the EU. Actually, what has happened is it hasn't changed the landscape of immigration at all, because the thing is, people that are fleeing war, fleeing torture, they have no choice. They are not choosing for their country and their homeland to become a war zone. They're not choosing that they want to leave their home, their family, their friends, their schools. They don't want to do that. It's the last resort. So when that happens, they're forced to move. And when they're forced to move, they have nowhere to go, and they end up having to travel to a place where they can find a community, where they have links, back to empire again. The British Empire spread the language, spread English across the globe. So a lot of people speak English. A lot of people have, a connection to our country. So what happens when they need to flee? They go to somewhere they have a connection. They don't, they flee to somewhere they have a connection. So that's what's happened. I think the Brexit, campaign was run in a bad way and using a lot of anti-immigration rhetoric. But I think it was false, and we've seen after the campaign, there's not been much of a change in immigration, and that sort of narrative and language is really fraudulent and a lie, I would say.
And Rav, as much as immigration is a hot button topic, and as much as it has become a political football, for want of a better term, what does common sense immigration policy look like? And that is regardless of party politics.
Yeah, so I mean, I think in terms of what we should be seeing from both parties at the moment is we want them to be asking for safe route policies. So we want them to be enabling people that are fleeing war, torture, climate crisis to come here in a safe way. We don't want them to be forcing people to go on, dangerous routes across the channel. The channel is one of the busiest shipping lanes in the world. It's a really treacherous journey that people are taking on, small dinghies. So what the solution to that, and the common sense solution to that, is safe routes. And we have seen that recently. I will applaud the government and say they did create such a scheme for Ukrainian refugees. They created an online visa scheme so Ukrainians could come here in a safe way. They didn't have to take treacherous journeys. But while I applaud them for doing that, I also condemn them for not bringing in that scheme for people from Afghanistan, from Syria, from Iraq, from Eritrea and Somalia. There's a lot of people across the world who are also fleeing wars. And I really think the government should open schemes like safe route schemes to lots of people, to all people that are fleeing war and torture. And in terms of both parties, I would say it's disappointing from the Labour Party as well. We haven't seen much from them recently in terms of progressive policies and asks. We've seen really pretty much similar to the Conservative Party. So I would urge them as well to bring better policies, call for safe routes, say that they're going to close detention centres and house people humanely. That's what we want to be seeing.
But let me play devil's advocate for a moment here. At the same time, can you have open border policies? How do you manage that influx of immigrants?
Yeah, well, look, again, I think the number of people that have ill motivation for coming to the country is really small. It's the journey that people have to go through, tearing their whole lives apart, traveling miles and miles in horrible situations is, really, really tough. And I think people don't do it unless it's their really last resort. And in terms of resources and management, as a country, we're we're the sixth richest nation in the world. We've got lots of money, lots of resources. And I think, it's a political choice by whichever government's in charge of how they use the resources. Do we use these resources to give tax breaks to the rich? Do we use these resources to give tax breaks to big corporations? Or do we use these resources for the people of the country? The people for their public services, for their education services, for the NHS? What do we do with it? Do we use this to be an open and compassionate country like, many people across the country are? There's a bit of a division between the people of the country who are very compassionate, very opening, very welcoming. We've seen that with the Ukraine war. We've seen people open their houses across the country. So that's where people are. Whereas the government are not as welcoming and opening. And we really need more from them to follow the lead of the people and be more opening, because we do have the resources. I think there's up to 200,000 empty homes across the country. The point I want to make, Shaka, is that we have a lot of space. The language around resources and management really, sometimes is really false. And we have a lot of space, we have a lot of resources, we have a lot of capacity in this country. And a sort of narrative around we're a small nation, we don't have money. I believe we need to push back on that, and we need to realize that actually we have a lot of resources. We are a very wealthy nation, and if we use those resources in the right way, if we share them and redistribute them in the right way, then actually we will have space for plenty of people. We'll have more space for people, across our country, in our own communities, and for people that are traveling here. And again, we are a compassionate country. We have a lot of compassionate people across the country, and I think they would be really open to finding solutions that mean we can live side by side as neighbours in happy and prospering communities.
Picking up on that theme, I guess you wrote a piece with Metro about workers' rights, and you compared and contrasted what was happening in Qatar, the criticism that it received from many quarters within the UK, to what is happening up and down the UK that so many continue to either turn a blind eye to willingly or just far too accepting of. What do you make of the criticism of Qatar hosting the World Cup and how that maybe plays out in the shadows within the UK?
Well, look, I think, we're right to call out injustices, human rights abuses, workers' rights abuses, wherever they occur, whether that's in Qatar or any country across the world. But definitely, we have to call out those same workers' rights abuses and human rights abuses in our own country. And, if you look across the spectrum in our country, from our schools, which are chronically underfunded and under-resourced, putting more stress on teachers who are educating our children and the next generation, to our hospitals, which look after our loved ones, our parents and children as again, who are pushed to the brink through the pandemic, and now are having to fight for better wages and conditions, to then our rail workers and transport workers who get us up and down the country. And then again, coming back to, refugees who are seeking asylum and a safe haven here. What are we telling them? Well, we're telling them we're going to send you 6,000 miles away to Rwanda, a country that they have no affinity to, that they don't know about. And then when you look at how we treat our planet, the government have allowed water companies to pour sewage into our local seas, our local rivers. So definitely we need to be calling out all of these things in our own country. It doesn't get any better when you look at how the government is looking at workers' rights at the moment, with sort of anti-strike laws going through, with the Human Rights Act maybe being torn up and human rights, being restricted. So yes, we need to call out injustices across the world, like we did with Qatar in the World Cup. I think that was good to call it out, but we also need to call out the injustices in our own country just as loudly. There's workers up and down the country who are fighting for their rights and being ripped off by the government and their bosses. There's people across the country suffering an energy crisis, a cost of living crisis, inflation is at 12%. So yeah, we need to call all of these things out here, because something's not right here as well. Something's not right here. So we need to be, making sure that that's said just as loudly.
I'm mindful of your role with the Joint Council for the Welfare of Immigrants as head of communications. Does communications need to play a bigger role in shaping that discourse?
Yeah, I mean, communication has to play a massive role, because, the way that the discussion is framed in immigration is really divisive. It's a massive us versus them. It's migrants on the outside versus British people on the inside. That's false. We're all together. We've all built communities across the country with immigrants. Immigrants have made our country better. If we look at our football team, Rashford, Saka, Sterling, these are all products of immigration. We love them. When they go and play for us in the World Cup, we love them. Myself, my family, people in my community in London and across the world, across the country, have come from across the world originally. So, immigration is really positive for us. And I think most of the people across the country know that. But you're right, Shaka, that we do need better communications to cut through against the sort of divisive language of the far right, of the right, that really splits us, because we know that when we're together, we're better and we're stronger. So we do need better communications. We do need to work together, and we do need to bring people together through those communications.
Rav, a lot of the issues you raise here are not just British issues; they're very much global issues. But at the same time, as we've seen globally, politics has become this hard divide. It's become about selling an idea. A lot of times it's been about catchphrases and takeaways. How do we balance the good, the communication, the issue of worker and immigration rights with simply winning votes, winning a popular vote? How do we address what may be a fundamental political need with one that is a very much human one?
Yeah, well, I mean, fundamentally, Shaka, we need to bring people together. We need to bring people together. We need people across the world and in our country to understand why immigration is good for them, why immigration is good for our country, why immigration is good for our society. I think actually in the last few years, we've seen a positive shift among the public opinion in terms of immigration. Polling has shown that 3 out of 4 people actually would welcome people to our country that are fleeing war and torture. So that's really positive. We've seen a really positive shift towards pro-immigration and pro-migration mindset of people across the country. And I think the reason that has happened is because people can see that people that come to our country are a benefit to us. They are a benefit to our communities. They are, they take part in our communities. They build our communities. They are our neighbors, our friends. Are that they own the local businesses. Maybe they work in local businesses. Once people come here, we build those relationships with them, and we build those community ties. So I think that's a really important thing that people understand, and to remind people of that. Actually, when people come here, they work alongside us. They are alongside us as our, friends and family eventually sometimes. So we should definitely, remember that immigration is an overall positive for our country and the world. People have always moved, really.
Rav, now if you permit me to be a little bit self-serving, you're one of the nominated appointees for the Show Recently Red Card Board of Trustees. What attracted you, given your work, given your experience, to an organization such as our own?
Well, look, firstly, I'm really proud to work alongside you and many other colleagues at the Red Card. I think the work that we do is brilliant. I think what attracted me is, the anti-racist educational work is so important. Educating people and educating children about what racism is, about how we can identify racism and push back against racism is so important. And I think that's really the forefront of how we deal with racism and racist attitudes across society. So that was a major attraction. In terms of a personal story and myself, when I was growing up as a kid in London and understanding race and understanding my surroundings as a young South Asian boy in the UK, I was a massive football fan, and I support Arsenal, and Thierry Henry is a massive idol for me. And I saw this video of Thierry Henry speaking out and in support of Samuel Eto'o, who was playing for Barcelona in 2006, and he had this racist abuse from the Spanish crowd in Spain, in Real Zaragoza, I believe. And Eto'o was abused. He walked off the pitch. There was a lot of media talk. Should he have walked off? Should he not have? And Thierry Henry came out and he supported him on a red card video, show recent red card video. And when I saw that, I started to understand racism more. I saw my idol speaking out and in support of someone else and in solidarity. And that really started my sort of affinity with the organization. And it was inspirational for me. And I think it was inspirational for a lot of my peer group. And yeah, it's a real honor to be here. I hope that we can have the same effect that the organization had on me at a young age for many other children across the country. And also a little one, Shaka. I remember 2006 World Cup. I remember seeing you on the pitch. I thought, wow. I felt like I was being represented because I saw you play in the UK in the Premier League. I thought, oh, I've seen that guy play, and now I'm watching him on the World Cup. So yeah, that's another little one for you.
Rob, thank you very much. You've taken me back down memory lane. But this organization has been built on people exactly like you who've given of themselves selflessly. That's why we've been successful. That's why the honor is ours to welcome you on board. This has been a fascinating discussion. I thank you very much for all the work that you do around immigration rights. As someone who's benefited from a life in the UK, who grew up in the Caribbean, post-colonial Caribbean, I'll also say I understand how fighting on those front lines, how important that is, how valuable your work is to not just immigrants coming to the UK, but our overall understanding and appreciation for a shared humanity. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for your efforts. I look forward to continuing these discussions.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Shaka. Thanks for your time too.